Welcome back to Unpolished but Cold. I'm Kathrin Shaffer, and this week we've been sitting in some uncomfortable spaces, showing up when nothing seems to change. Admitting that quite feeling of being spiritually behind. That sense that everyone else somehow got the hang of this before we did. So, before we head into the weekend, sorry, just trying to put my paperwork away. I want to talk about something that gently pulls all of that pressure apart. Faith isn't a race, and God isn't timing you, and you're not behind. So let's slow this down together. By the time Friday rolls around, most of us aren't craving another insight or revelation. We're craving permission to stop evaluating ourselves, to take a break from the internal performance review we didn't realize we were conducting all week. Because even when no one else is saying it, there's a voice that keeps whispering, "You should be further along by now." Not because anything is obviously wrong. Life hasn't fallen apart. Faith hasn't collapsed. We're still praying, trusting, trying. But that voice is persistent. And it knows how to sound reasonable. It doesn't accuse us outright. Oh no. No. It gently nudges. It asks questions that feel responsible on the surface. It sounds like self-awareness, like maturity, perhaps even accountability. Why does this still bother me? Shouldn't this be easier by now? Why am I still circling the same struggles? And those questions don't come from rebellion. They come from caring, from wanting faith to grow, from wanting our walk with God to look like something solid and grounded. But when those questions stack up without context, they create pressure. And pressure changes how we experience faith. Instead of walking with God, we start monitoring ourselves. We notice how often we hesitate when we talk about spiritual things. We pay attention to how confident other people sound. We compare how quickly they seem to make decisions, how sure they are about God's direction, how settled they appear in their beliefs. And slowly, without meaning to, we turn faith into a pace we're trying to keep up with. What's tricky is that nobody hands us this pace. We pick it up through osmosis. From testimonies that skip the middle, from sermons that highlight breakthroughs, but not endurance. From social media snippets where faith looks clean, articulate, and always moving forward. So when our faith feels slower, messier, still under construction, we assume that means something's wrong. But most of the pressure we feel isn't coming from God at all. It's coming from expectations we absorb without realizing it. We rarely stop to question those expectations. We just accept them as truth. That faith should be clearer by now. Trust should feel steadier by now. That I shouldn't still be wrestling with this. And once by now enters the conversation, joy quietly exits stage left. Because by now is a deadline. And deadlines turn relationship into obligation. Suddenly, faith feels like something we're behind on, like we missed a class or skipped a prerequisite, like everyone else somehow moved ahead while we're still figuring things out. And that feeling doesn't motivate us. It weighs us down, makes prayer feel performative, makes reflection feel tense. It makes us question whether our pace is disappointing God, even though we'd never say that out loud. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of what we call spiritual maturity is just confidence in presentation. Oof. We assume that people who speak clearly about God must be closer to Him, that certainty equals depth, that quick answers mean strong faith. But clarity and closeness aren't the same thing. Some people speak confidently because they've learned how to live with unanswered questions. Others speak confidently because they've learned how to avoid them. From the outside, those two things can look identical. Meanwhile, people who are actually doing deep internal work often sound less certain, not more. They pause, they think, they wrestle. They hesitate before speaking because they know how complex faith can be. And that doesn't mean they're behind. It means they're paying attention. But our culture doesn't reward paying attention. It rewards confidence. So, when we don't feel confident, we assume we're lacking. That's when faith starts to feel like something we need to manage instead of something we're living. We edit ourselves, we soften our doubts, we keep certain questions tucked away because we don't want to sound like we're still figuring things out. We are figuring things out. All of us are. Even the people who sound sure. The difference is who feels safe admitting it. Another piece of this pressure comes from misunderstanding how growth actually works. We picture spiritual growth as linear, as a straight path forward where struggles fall away once they've been dealt with. But real growth doesn't eliminate struggle, it reframes it. Old questions don't disappear, they deepen. Familiar challenges resurface in new forms. What once felt like confusion becomes discernment. What once felt like doubt becomes humility. That doesn't feel like progress, it feels like looping. So when we find ourselves revisiting the same themes again and again, we assume we're stuck. But often, we're just seeing those themes with new eyes. And life has a way of revisiting lessons when we're ready to understand them differently. Trust looks different after disappointment. Faith looks different after loss. Obedience looks different when it costs more. Relearning doesn't mean failing, it means growing. Still, pressure persists because growth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with markers. It doesn't come with a certificate that says, "Congratulations, you've moved on." So we keep checking ourselves against invisible standards, wondering if we're falling short. And that's where faith starts to feel heavy. The moment we realize that God isn't timing us is the moment something inside us finally loosens. Because Think about how much energy we spend trying to keep pace with an expectation God never set. How much emotional weight we carry trying to become a version of ourselves we think He prefers. God isn't interested in fast faith. He's interested in real faith. And real faith takes time. Not because God is slow, but because trust can't be rushed. Neither can healing, neither can wisdom, and neither can transformation. Those things grow through lived experience, not deadlines. When we let go of the idea that faith is a race, prayer changes. It stops being strategic and starts being honest. We stop trying to say the right things and start saying the true things. And that alone can feel like progress. We also stop panicking every time growth feels quiet. Silence no longer feels like failure. Slowness no longer feels like delay. Ordinary days stop feeling like wasted time. Instead of asking, am I doing enough? We start asking, am I staying connected? And that's a much gentler question. And it's the one God actually cares about. Connection doesn't move at a fixed speed. It deepens over time through consistency, honesty, and presence. You can't force it. You can only tend it. And that's why urgency works against faith. Urgency creates anxiety. Anxiety pushes us to control. Control crowds out trust. God doesn't form people under pressure. He forms them in relationship. When we stop trying to rush ourselves, faith becomes livable again. Not dramatic, not flashy, just sustainable. It starts looking like steady obedience instead of constant breakthroughs. Like showing up on ordinary days without expecting fireworks. Like trusting God's character even when we don't understand His timing. That kind of faith holds up when life gets heavy. It doesn't burn bright and burn out. It doesn't depend on constant reassurance. It's rooted, not reactive. And here's the thing we rarely admit. Slow faith is often strong faith. It's been tested. It's been questioned. It's survived disappointment. It's learned how to stay. So, if this week stirred something uncomfortable, if you recognize that pressure to hurry, that feeling of being behind, that urge to measure yourself, let Friday be the day you release it. You're not late. You're not slow. You're not disappointing God. You're becoming. And becoming doesn't happen on a schedule. God already knows where you are. He's not standing ahead of you, waiting for you to catch up, tapping his foot. He's walking with you. at a pace that allows you to actually stay with Him. That's not failure. It's faith. But before we finish, I'll just say this. If you ever want to connect more or explore the resources we've been creating, you can find everything on kathrinshaffer.com. And you can always reach me on Facebook under the same name. That's where the books, studies, and other tools live, and where people sometimes ask how to support the work. But there's no pressure at all. This podcast is free and always will be. I just want you to know where to find me if you need it. But as you head into the weekend, let yourself slow down. Faith doesn't need to race to be real. Have an amazing weekend. Until next week, friends.